Your lease expires Friday. I suggest you start packing." Joelle didn't answer right away. She stood in the doorway of what used to be her father's study, the room that still smelled like cedar and old paper. And she looked at the woman sitting behind the desk like she owned it, because now she did. Vivienne Ashford had a way of delivering bad news that made it sound like she was doing you a favor. Soft voice, measured tone, the kind of calm that took years of practice to perform. She had her reading glasses perched at the end of her nose and a pen in her hand, and she didn't look up when she said it, didn't even bother. Joelle Addo was 23 years old, had just come home from 18 months with the Royal Canadian Regiment, and she was being told to pack her bags by a woman she had known for 6 years and never once trusted. "Friday," Joelle said. "That's what I said. My father's funeral was 11 days ago." Vivienne finally looked up. There was nothing cruel in her eyes, which somehow made it worse. It was just business. It was just the way things were. "The estate has been assessed. The house transfers to me as the surviving spouse. I have already spoken with a solicitor. Everything is in order." She set the pen down. "You're welcome to take your personal items. Anything in the basement storage that belonged to your mother, if you can identify it. But the furniture, the art, those are part of the estate. My mother's things are subject to the estate assessment, yes." Joelle didn't raise her voice. She had been trained not to. 18 months, learning to hold still under pressure, to breathe through the instinct to react. She stood in that doorway, and she breathed. "There's a photo," she said, "on the mantel in the living room. My father and my mother, from their wedding, before you." Vivienne picked up her pen again. "I'll have someone catalog the photographs. If it's clearly personal, it will be set aside." Someone. She said someone like Joelle wasn't standing right there, like this wasn't her house, like it had never been. Joelle looked at the desk one more time. Her father's desk, the one he bought at an auction in Kingston when she was 7, the one he let her do homework on when she visited his office downtown. And she turned and walked down the hallway and out the front door without another word. She sat in her car for 4 minutes. Then she drove away. Her father, Winston Addo, had been a quiet man who built things slowly. He came to Canada from Ghana at 26 with a master's degree and a suitcase, and 40 years later he had a civil engineering firm with 60 employees and a house in the Glebe that backed onto the canal. He was not flashy. He wore the same watch for 30 years, a steel Seiko his own father had given him, and he drove a sensible sedan, and he was home for dinner most nights when Joelle was growing up. He met Vivienne at a charity gala 8 years before he died. Joelle was 15. She saw it coming the way you see weather coming. A pressure in the air, a change in light. But there was nothing to do about it. Vivienne had 2 sons from a previous marriage. Callum, who was 22 and worked in finance, and Reed, who was 19 and didn't seem to work at all. They moved into the house in the Glebe the year Joelle turned 16, and after that, the house felt smaller. Not because of the square footage. The house was big enough. It felt smaller because of the way Vivienne rearranged things, the way she moved furniture without asking, the way she replaced Joelle's mother's dishes with new ones and had the study repainted a color she chose, the way she looked at Winston when he disagreed with her, not angry, just patient, the way you're patient with someone who doesn't quite understand yet. Joelle's mother had died when Joelle was 9. Her name was Abina, and she had been a nurse, and she had laughed loudly at her own jokes, and she smelled like shea butter, and she was gone before Joelle was old enough to know her properly. Winston kept a photograph of her on the mantel, kept it there through everything, until Vivienne moved in. And then it moved to the basement. Joelle found it down there on a visit home during her first year of service. She brought it upstairs. Vivienne said nothing, but 2 weeks later, after Joelle had gone back, the photo was gone again. She asked her father about it once. Just once. He said, "Joelle, please, things are delicate right now." She never asked again. She found a room in a house share in Vanier, 3 other women, a kitchen that smelled like takeout, a window that looked at a brick wall. She paid first and last, and she put her duffel bag in the corner, and she sat on the edge of the bed, and she thought, okay, this is where we are. She still had her salary from the regiment. She had savings, not a lot, but some. She had a letter of reference from her commanding officer that described her as one of the most technically precise and psychologically composed soldiers he had supervised in 14 years of service. She had a degree she had deferred that she could pick back up at Carleton. She had, when she got very still and thought about it, the knowledge that she had survived harder things than this. She enrolled in the fall semester, civil engineering, same field as her father. Some people thought that was strange, given everything. Joelle didn't think it was strange. She thought it made sense. It was his, and now it was hers, and whatever Vivienne had taken, she had not taken that. She was a good student. She had always been a good student, but now she had something to prove. Not to Vivienne, not to anyone watching, just to herself. And that kind of motivation is quiet and steady, and it does not run out. She graduated 2 years later, top quartile, and she went to work for a mid-sized firm in Ottawa doing infrastructure assessment. She was good at it. She had a way of looking at a structure, a bridge, a building, a retaining wall, and seeing not what it was, but what it was becoming. The slow drift, the hairline stress, the thing that would matter later. Her manager, a laconic man named Douglas Firth, who had been in the field for 30 years, told her once that she had the rarest quality in engineering: patience. Most young engineers want to find the problem. Joelle would wait until the problem showed itself. She worked at the firm for 4 years. Then she left to start her own consultancy. It was small at first. Just her and a drafting table in a spare room and a laptop and a list of contacts. She had built one careful relationship at a time. She did assessment work for small municipalities, for private developers, for a few construction firms that needed someone to review specs before a project broke ground. She charged fair rates. She delivered on time. She did not overpromise. By the 3rd year, she had 4 employees. By the 5th, she had 11. Her firm, she called it Addo Structural, won a contract with the city of Ottawa to assess a portfolio of aging infrastructure across 3 boroughs. It was the largest contract she had ever signed. She sat in the parking lot of the city offices afterward and called her aunt in Accra, and her aunt cried on the phone, and Joelle didn't quite, but it was close. She did not think about Vivienne very often. This is important to say. She was not building her career to prove something to Vivienne Ashford. She was building it because it was hers to build, because her father had handed her something, not money, not property, not a house by the canal, but a way of doing things, steady, methodical, one stone at a time. But then the call came. It was a Tuesday morning in March, 8 years after she had driven away from the house in the Glebe. Joelle was in a site meeting when her phone buzzed. She stepped outside. The number was one she didn't recognize. It was a property manager named Sutcliffe, Gerald Sutcliffe, with a firm called Meridian Property Partners. And he told her that a residential property at an address she knew very well had come to market. The owner was motivated to sell. The price was below assessed value. He had been given her name by someone at the city, a reference. He thought she might be interested. Joelle stood on the sidewalk with the wind off the canal cutting through her jacket, and she asked him to repeat the address. He did. "When can I see it?" she said. The house looked smaller than she remembered. That's the thing about the places you grow up. They exist at a scale inside you that the real world can never match. She stood outside it in a wool coat, with her hands in her pockets, and she just looked at it for a moment. The front garden was overgrown. The trim needed repainting. The front step had a crack running through it that she could see from the sidewalk. She walked through it with Sutcliffe. 2 floors, 4 bedrooms, a study, a kitchen that had been updated sometime in the last decade, a backyard that backed onto the canal path. She noted the crack in the front step. She noted the window in the third bedroom that had fogged between the panes, failed seal, moisture intrusion. She noted the water stain on the ceiling of the basement storage room that suggested a slow leak, probably from the bathroom above. She knew this house. She had spent years in it. She knew where the floors were soft and where the drafts came in, and which drawer in the kitchen stuck in the humidity of summer. "I'll make an offer," she said. She went in at 3% below asking. They countered at asking. She came up 2% and said that was her final number. They accepted. She did not tell anyone who she was in relation to the house. She did not need to. The closing took 6 weeks. On the morning of the transfer, she sat in her solicitor's office and signed the documents and shook the hand of the man across the table who represented Vivienne Ashford. And he did not know who she was, and she did not tell him. She walked out of that office the owner of the house at the corner of her childhood. She spent 2 months on renovations. She fixed the front step. She replaced the failed window. She had the basement assessed for the leak and repaired it properly. She had the whole exterior repainted a soft gray that her father would have liked. She planted things in the front garden. She did not rush any of it, and then she listed it as a rental. The listing went up on a Wednesday. By Friday, she had 11 inquiries. One of them was from a name she recognized, V. Ashford. Joelle sat at her kitchen table. Her table, in her apartment 2 blocks away, the one with the window that looked out over the market. And she read the inquiry 3 times. She did not feel what she thought she would feel. She expected anger or satisfaction or some heated mixture of the two. What she felt was quieter than that. A kind of stillness, like standing on a bridge and looking at water. She emailed back. She said she was happy to arrange a showing. She did the showing herself. Vivienne Ashford was 61 years old, and she looked like someone who had spent years being comfortable and recently found that comfort taken away. The lines around her mouth were deeper. Her coat was good quality, but a few years old. She walked through the house with the careful tread of someone who did not want to seem too eager. She did not recognize Joelle at first, or if she did, she said nothing. They moved through the ground floor. The kitchen, the living room, the back window that looked out at the canal path, the same view that Joelle had grown up with, the reeds and the water, and the people walking their dogs in the morning. Vivienne stopped at the mantel. There was a photograph there. Now Joelle had found it, not the original. That was gone, but a copy she had made from a scan her aunt had kept. Winston and Vivienne Addo at their wedding, laughing at something off camera. Joelle had framed it and put it there the day she completed the renovation. Vivienne looked at it for a long moment. Then she turned around, and she looked at Joelle, really looked at her, the way you look at someone when the context catches up with you and everything rearranges. "Joelle," she said, "Mrs. Ashford." Joelle kept her voice easy. "Shall I show you the upstairs?" Vivienne stood very still. You could see her trying to decide something. What to say, what posture to take, which version of herself to perform right now. "You own this house," she said. It wasn't a question. "I do, your father's house." "My father's house," Joelle said. "Yes." A long pause. The light through the back window was gray and flat, the kind of March afternoon that can't quite decide whether to end. "I had no idea," Vivienne said finally. "The listing, it was under a company name, Addo Structural Holdings." Joelle almost smiled. "I named it after him." Vivienne looked at the photograph again. Then she looked at the floor. Then she looked up. "The rent," she said. "What you're asking, it's within what I can manage. I want you to know that I'm not in a position to negotiate downward. I'm just telling you I can meet the number." "I know," Joelle said. "I did the showing myself to make sure of it." There was a beat of silence that held more than either of them said. "There's a condition," Joelle said. "Not a legal one, just mine." Vivienne waited. "There's a storage unit registered in my father's name at a facility on Clyde Avenue. His personal effects, the things from his office, from his study, were transferred there after the house sold. I need those transferred to me. All of it. Vivienne's face did something complicated. "Of course," she said, after a moment. "I should have. Yes, of course. I'll draw up the lease when you're ready," Joelle said. She walked Vivienne to the front door and held it open, and they stood for a moment in the pale afternoon, the crack in the step filled and level now, the front garden beginning to push green through the cold. "Your father," Vivienne said. She stopped. Started again. "He was proud of you. He talked about you. He talked about you a great deal." Joelle had heard that before, from other people, from her aunt, from her father's business partner, who had come to the funeral and found her afterward, and told her the same thing, quietly, like it was something she needed to know. She had heard it and tucked it away in the place where she kept the things she couldn't look at directly yet. She heard it again now, and it landed differently, from this woman in this doorway, with that photograph visible through the glass. "I know," Joelle said. She did not say anything else. She didn't need to. Vivienne nodded once. Something collapsed and reformed in her expression, and then she walked down the front path to her car. Joelle stood in the doorway of her father's house, her house, and watched her go. There was a woman who walked past on the canal path just then, a golden retriever pulling ahead of her, and she glanced over at the house and at Joelle in the doorway, and she gave a small, neighborly nod. Joelle nodded back. Then she went inside and closed the door behind her, and the house was quiet and still and smelled like fresh paint and cedar. And she walked to the mantel and stood in front of the photograph for a moment. Her father, and her mother, laughing before anything, and then she went to the kitchen to put the kettle on.